Good evening, everyone. It's shortly after 7:30 on June 4th. This is the regular meeting of Lakewood City Council. If you would all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Anderson.
Present.
Bullock.
Here.
George. Here. Litton.
Here.
O'Leary.
Here.
O'Malley.
Here.
Rader.
Here. Move to defer reading and disposal of the minutes of the special meeting of council held April 30th, 2018.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to defer reading and disposal of the special council meeting minutes from April 30th? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes. Move to dispose of the minutes of the regular meeting of council held May 7th, 2018 without reading.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to dispose of the regular council May 7th, 2018 minutes without reading? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? And that motion passes. Now, before we get to the top of our agenda this evening, our numbered agenda, there are two items that I would like to move to the top of our agenda without objection this evening. And the first item is actually an add-on, and that is acknowledgement of the 2018 Mission Lifeline EMS recognition. So, Mayor Summers, I believe you have a little bit more background.
Yeah, thank you, Council President O'Leary, members of Council, members of the audience. I'd like to invite Mary Seidel to step to the podium. Mary is one of our seasoned veterans of our emergency medical staff and would like to share some good news. Thank you, Mary.
So apparently if you show up last, you have to speak, so I got delegated to speak. The Mission Lifeline Award is through the American Heart Association. And what it is American Heart develops Mission Lifeline. They want to transform care for critical care patients like people having heart attack and strokes. And they want to deliver the best care possible from the start of the 911 call all the way through hospital discharge. And they developed this system, so I collected all the data from us, and we work with the hospital to try to get quick, seamless care throughout that whole situation that the person's going through. So all I had to do is supply data, and we met the requirements to get this award. It's trying to form a system of care that's best for our patients, and it saves lives and improves lives for the residents. And does anybody have any questions about that?
Well, if you could share a little bit of, we've heard for many years here how time is tissue. So how has the time been affected by this continuum of care you've talked about?
Sure. So time is important in a lot of medical emergencies. The quicker response that somebody actually calls when they're having a medical emergency, and the quicker we get there, the more treatment options the patient has. If they wait long, if they develop symptoms and they just don't call 911, or if we weren't available and it's an extended period of time, they don't have as many treatment options when they go to the hospital then. So getting there quickly and with all the good communications between the hospital and us, they have better care and better treatment and more options.
I think the technology starts with this life pack that creates the diagnosis or the technology.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit of information about that?
Sure. So when we get on scene of anybody, this particularly was for chest pain calls, we right away do what's called a 12-lead EKG. And that determines if somebody's having a heart attack. We learn how to identify 12 leads. We're taught by our medical director and stuff how to read these EKGs, and then we transmit them to the hospital. And as soon as it gets to the hospital, an alarm will go off, and then the doctor immediately comes over, looks at the EKG, and then give us information on treating something differently, or that the hospital will get prepared for when we get there. So again, so everything's really quickly. Sometimes we actually go straight to what's called the cath lab. So if they know somebody's having a heart attack, sometimes we bypass the emergency room just because of that EKG getting transmitted, and we'll go straight to the cath lab. So again, time is the issue here. Less muscle damage on your heart and stuff like that, the quicker you get to the cath lab.
So we're delighted to acknowledge, one, the performance day in, day out of our technology, our technologists, and the ability to apply that to the improved health of our citizens, and to acknowledge that we must be doing something average or better than average to get this
Better than
award.
average, because I've already looked at the data that's already been happening this year alone, and we have way exceeded our goal for heart attacks and STEMIs, so we'll definitely be able to apply again for this award and actually get the second status of a gold award instead of Silver Plus that we have.
Yeah,
So.
So, thank
And
you,
again,
Mary.
they use data, so data is important because when we know where we're lacking, if we're not sending the EKG quick enough, if we're not getting to the hospital quick enough, we're not notifying them, there's where we need to improve, and every year we work with the hospital system to try to improve those deficiencies.
And we just received a new squad, did we not?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, and does that do anything for us that the other ones didn't do?
Smoother ride, yeah. For the bumpy roads, it's a lot smoother ride.
Alrighty. Well,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Mary. Thank you, teammates, for being here.
Congratulations.
Thank you, Council President.
Let's have a round of applause. Thank you. Now, without objection, I'd like to move item number 3, and that's resolution number 9004-18 to the top of our agenda this evening. Hearing no objection, Madam Clerk.
Resolution 9004-18, adopting the recommendations of the Foundation Planning Task Force for the creation of the Healthy Lakewood Foundation, the appointment of its initial board, and the approval of its initial governing documents, all in accordance with the master agreement governing healthcare in Lakewood, dated December 21st, 2015.
Thank you. And we are joined this evening yet again by, it looks like a very healthy, no pun intended, contingent from the Foundation Planning Task Force, as well as, I believe, some of the members, or some of the individuals, rather, who are under consideration for membership in the new board. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Mr. Daniel Cohn and Ms. Smigelski and any other members of the task force, I should say, who are presenting this evening Martha Halko and Katie Collin as well.
We're not bringing our lawyers with us this time.
So, all right.
He's here, though, just in case.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you, guys. We so appreciate your taking the time yet again, and we are just so thrilled to continue the conversation with you. It's been a pleasure to talk with many of you individually over the past couple weeks to clarify some of the questions that you had as a result of our prior presentation. And today we will work through with you a deeper dive into the board selection process. Just a little bit of an agenda for today, and we hope not to take too much of your time, but we'll walk through a little bit about who we are. And the folks who are represented here are those who, among the task force, were most intimately involved in the board selection process. 4 of us were involved in interviewing each of the 21 kind of shortlisted candidates, and of course Julie Clark, who you'll hear about in a bit, from BVU, which was a consultant recommended by the mayor, but someone who we have come to deeply admire and respect. We'll talk a little bit about our charge and our timeline and the process under which we made some of these decisions, and then tell you about the board slate. We want to introduce each of these individuals to you and give you a sense of the full complement and how each of their knowledge, skills, and life experiences sort of meld with one another to provide a sort of uniquely qualified board to shepherd the inauguration of this foundation. Oh no, I broke it. So just to introduce ourselves, as you know, I'm Dan. I serve as chair of the board selection committee and vice chair of the Healthy Lakewood Foundation. We wanted to give you a sense of our relevant professional experience as well as some of the boards that we serve on so that you have a sense of kind of where we're coming from and the lens that we're using as we have proposed this slate to you. I currently serve as vice president of the Mount Sinai Healthcare Foundation, which is another healthcare conversion foundation just down the street that also resulted from the closure of a hospital. Its corpus is about $160 million, so slightly larger than the foundation that we're dealing with, but the politics and the feelings in the community were quite similar upon closure of that hospital. Prior to this, I served as Assistant Director of Programs and Operations at Cornell University, focusing particularly on community engagement and community outreach. And then prior to that, I was in DC and in Boston as a fellow with the Congressional Hunger Center, focusing primarily on anti-hunger and anti-poverty and advocacy and policy development. Currently, I serve on several boards, most recently as of a couple weeks ago. My God, I don't know why I keep saying yes to things, but I serve on the Bank of America Foundation Neighborhood Builders Selection Committee. I'm a board member of the Health Policy Institute of Ohio, the Steering Committee of Philanthropy Ohio, which is the statewide trade organization for philanthropy in Ohio. I'm on the Agency Eligibility Committee, wow, say that 10 times fast, of the United Way, a board member of Facing History and Ourselves, which is a national education nonprofit, Ohio State University Extension, and the AIDS Funding Collaborative, whose director is present and on our board slate.
Good evening. My name is Katie Collin, and I, too, am a member of this board selection committee. My relevant professional experience is that I'm currently a gift planning officer with the Cleveland Foundation, and I had 2 previous roles with Cleveland Clinic's Philanthropy Institute, and during law school, I was the Development and Communications Assistant at the Legal Aid Society of Cleveland. As a board and volunteer experience, I am part of the Review Committee for the Cleveland Foundation Public Service Fellows, part of the Membership Committee for the Estate Planning Council of Cleveland, part of the Review Committee and a mentor for the Cleveland Foundation Summer Internship Program, a task force member for the National Association of Charitable Gift Planners, and I've been involved with the Summer on the Cuyahoga program through Smith College, both as a member and a board member for many, many years. I'm also introducing Martha Halko, who could not be with us tonight due to a previous commitment. Martha is the Deputy Director for Prevention and Wellness for the Cuyahoga County Board of Health. She was previously a coordinator with the Health Improvement Partnership Cuyahoga and a fellow with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation Ladder to Leadership program. Her relevant board and volunteer experience include a member of the Health Policy Institute of Ohio Health Equity Advisory Group, a member of Health Policy Institute of Ohio Prevention and Public Health Policy Advisory Group, and co-lead Collaborative for Health Equity Cuyahoga County team.
I'm Vicki Smigelski. I'm currently manager of self-insurance for KKSG and Associates, and I have 30-plus years of experience in human resources. The white hair wouldn't show that, but my board experience most recently includes I'm currently on the Board of Trustees and a past president for the Lakewood Rangers Education Foundation. I'm also one of the founding members of the City of Lakewood H2O Community Advisory Council. I'm a lay leader for visioning and strategic planning at Lakewood Congregational Church, and I'm very proud to say a lifelong Lakewood resident. Julie Clark is from BVU and has been our consultant in this board selection process, and she's going to talk a little bit about herself.
Thank you. So BVU is a nonprofit that's based here in Northeast Ohio that focuses on strengthening the nonprofit community by engaging businesses. We've been around for, we've been around for 25 years, and in those 25 years have had the pleasure of working with more than 3,300 nonprofit organizations in Northeast Ohio. And we do consulting for both board development, succession planning, executive transition planning, mergers, strategic planning, all of that to help support and our wonderful nonprofit community in Northeast Ohio. I've been with BVU for a little more than 11 years, and my role as Managing Director of Leadership Development includes doing what I had the pleasure of doing with the task force and the board selection committee, really helping nonprofits strengthen the performance and engagement of their boards. And I also do succession planning, strategic planning, and some operational consulting. Among working with 40, 50 boards every year, I have the honor of serving on 2 boards as well in leadership roles with South Suburban Montessori School and the Treehouse, Ohio.
So we just wanted to give you a sense of our charge too, and thank you all for introducing yourselves. One thing that isn't listed here but will be listed at the end is that about 3/4 of the total task force took part in this subcommittee, so it's a pretty strong representation of the group that we have been convening over the past year and a half. I first wanted to give you a timeline. We wanted to give you a timeline of our charge and our task at hand. originally selecting the board or proposing a board slate to you was not part of our original charge. We were asked and implored by the mayor in March to take this on as sort of a natural extension of the work that we were already doing. We had also heard from constituents from the Save Lakewood Hospital campaign that this was, in their opinion, a way to continue to cultivate community trust and to help heal the divide that's really happened in this community. Other relevant folks that were involved in that meeting included Councilman Bullock, Councilman Litton, and of course Mayor Summers. In April, we made public our draft plan for our board selection process, and we asked for feedback in April 2018. Of course, those folks who were present at that meeting included many of you, as well as the mayor. And then in late April 2018, we began recruiting applicants for the board, and we interviewed and we whittled those down with the help of BVU and completed our interviews and our board slate selection in May 2018. As we were thinking about how we would craft a board on your behalf, we had in the back of our minds some of the heavy lifting that this inaugural board would have to do. As you know, the task force took on creating the sort of framework, the skeleton of the foundation, including the legal framework and the infrastructure, but we were not charged with creating a strategic plan or any sort of grant-making processes or even hiring staff. Those are all things that we anticipate a future board having to take on. And so as we thought about the knowledge and skills that would be necessary for a board to engage in those critical decisions, those were some of the things that were in the back of our minds, and I want to go through some of the knowledge and skills and diversity factors that we thought would make a full complement of a board well-equipped to take on these tasks. So some of them are listed here: devise a strategic plan, as I had mentioned, creating grant-making policies and practices, identifying and pursuing strategic partnerships, not only at the state level, but even locally as well as at the national level, hiring staff and consultants, organizing into committees and internal structures, drafting, and we hope this will be one of the first things that the board would take on, but drafting an equity, diversity, and inclusion statement, and we've provided you with the task force's definition of each of those words, and we hope that the future board would use those as they define their own statement and values around equity, diversity, and inclusion. We anticipate, actually they are mandated, the future board will be mandated to craft a community outreach and accountability plan within its first year of creation, and then update that plan on a 3-year basis, and finally setting up, of course, HLF for its long-term success. And again, after that initial charge, I just wanted to walk through with you our process, and I can't remember if this is you, Julie, or is this one me? I feel like you're going to take this on because you're a rock star. I think you wrote this one. You did write this one.
All right. So just to share BVU's involvement in the process, I had the opportunity to meet with the mayor's office in early April, and then got a phone call a couple days later saying, yeah, we have a slightly more aggressive timeline. We're ready to go. So we began work with the task force and the board selection committee pretty immediately. And in my role throughout all of this was to be an impartial, non-Lakewood resident, which after having the opportunity to spend time with all of these amazing folks, I kind of want to live here. It's amazing, an amazing place. That's right. My husband doesn't know that, but really to kind of shepherd this process and in the end help the task force develop this inaugural board to launch this foundation and ensure success moving forward. So we went through a really intentional, thorough process. It was not cookie cutter. As I mentioned, I work with 30 to 40 boards a year. I've never worked with, had an experience quite like this one. The intentionality, the thoughtfulness, the deliberateness of this whole process is something that I think this board selection committee and the task force and everybody who's been involved really should be commended for. We crafted an application and did outreach that we think in the end, resulted in the highest caliber of candidates and applicants and folks who are going to lead this organization moving forward. I was the fortunate recipient of all of the applications, and so as I got to meet some of the folks tonight, it was great because it was like, I've read about you. You're awesome, and I can't wait to learn more about you and your involvement. So all the applications came through BVU. I inventoried all of the candidate information, and then I took a first pass at really kind of organizing that information and kind of sorting folks into, yeah, this is somebody that I think you probably want to consider, kind of a super strong candidates, and then, some other folks. And again, it's based on the skills and knowledge that folks are bringing to the table, especially their nonprofit board and work experience, because as Dan just outlined, there's a lot of heavy lifting that has to happen in order to launch this here in the near future. And so folks who have had experience doing that are going to be especially helpful. The networks and connections in the community, looking at all of that through a diversity lens without being that being a sole qualifier, but considering that. And also the thoughtfulness of the application responses. So folks completed an application that asked not just for, checking off boxes and saying who you were and what your skills were, but also sharing a little bit about, your lived experiences and how that might contribute to your value that you could add to the organization, as well as, what are those specific experiences that you've had that are going to be really, really valuable as this foundation launches. So that gives folks the opportunity to share, yeah, I've been part of a founding board. I've, been involved in healthcare, here's my academic experience, whatever might be helpful. So the thoughtfulness of many of those applications was incredible. And I will say, again, with 80 plus candidates that came through, the caliber of folks was unprecedented. I've never seen anything quite like it, and actually shared with a colleague as we were talking about it, and it was like, wow, the commitment and dedication and the interest of folks to serve and be part of this is something really to be admired. So with the board selection committee, we reviewed the full matrix of the 80 plus candidates. And then as I had said, I put together a recommended short list. We had robust discussion. They did not agree with everybody that I had put on that short list, which is great. I didn't want to have that kind of blanket approval. We had good discussion, and then in the end came together with them deciding upon 18 candidates that they wanted to be interviewed.
Just to be clear, the 18 candidates, it said 21 on the last slide. There were 18 that we interviewed because, according to the Code of Regulations, at least 2 of the task force members would be selected as part of our board slate to help with institutional memory and transitioning some of the knowledge from the work that we've done over the past year and a half. We chose not to interview those 3 candidates in part because of time constraints, but also because we had gotten to know them and sort of what secret sauce they would add to the mix over the past year and a half, and just didn't find it necessary. But we did interview the other 18 candidates that BVU and our task force subcommittee brought together. So Julie did a really great job of overviewing the process and kind of intermingling the timeline. I just want to give you a deeper dive into what the task force took on with the assistance of BVU. So as we were thinking about that charge that I had overviewed, and as we talked a little bit about some of the knowledge and skills that Julie was looking for, I want to point out to you that we went to school. We did some research on what are some of the knowledge, skills, and lived experiences that are most necessary for a successful foundation board. We, of course, reflected on our own personal experiences and leaned heavily on BVU as well. And as I had suggested in the last meeting, I do want to read for you some of the things that we are screening for and some of the collective experiences that we hoped would be represented in the room. So in terms of skills of board members, we were looking for those who had nonprofit management skills, strategic planning, program evaluation, technology and IT, finance, accounting, and investment, legal, healthcare and wellness experience, personnel and HR, government relations, marketing, communications, social media, education, and then, of course, other, and candidates could fill in on their application or as part of their interview process. In terms of areas of knowledge that we thought were really important, not only to boards writ large, but to a board that we intended and everyone intends to serve Lakewood, we found that these areas of knowledge would be most useful. Community engagement and organizing, equity, diversity, and inclusion, collaborative leadership, mental and behavioral health, the social determinants of health, education, economic development, aging, early childhood, issues related to immigration and refugees, public health, faith-based initiatives, and other. And in terms of diversity factors and lived experiences that we hoped would be brought to bear in decision-making processes in the boardroom, we screened for things including Lakewood residency, age, race, gender and gender identity, education, ethnicity, culture, socioeconomic status, disability, and LGBTQ identification. And of course, other folks could self-identify as having other lived experiences that they wanted to bring to bear in a boardroom. After co-creating this matrix with BVU, we really engaged in a broad communications strategy across all of our social media, as much print media as we could. We reached out into our own networks. We reached out to the 87 individuals that we had interviewed as part of our community engagement process throughout the past year and a half. And as Julie had mentioned, we interviewed 18 candidates and had 3 that we already knew quite well. And I think I got everything else on this slide. The one thing that I do want to mention, and the one question, I mean, there were multiple questions that were actually consistent throughout our interview process, but the one that we always started with was board members had to demonstrate a commitment to Lakewood and to the mission of the Healthy Lakewood Foundation. So we always started the conversation with, tell us a little bit about why you're interested in the mission of the Healthy Lakewood Foundation and your commitment to that mission. And just as a reminder, I wanted to bring forth to you the vision and mission statement for the future foundation. Our vision, our guiding star, would be Lakewood is a place where all people achieve their fullest health potential. And in order to achieve or work toward that guiding star, the Healthy Lakewood Foundation would advance programs, policies, and practices that inspire a Lakewood community in which health and wellness are reflected in all aspects of life. We don't have to go over the guiding principles. I know we're getting quite deep into this. We brought forth a couple weeks ago these definitions of equity, diversity, and inclusion. Those are included in the slides, and you're welcome to look at those later. But again, I don't want to skip over this too quickly. This was an integral part of our decision-making process and an integral part of what we hope the future board will include as part of their own decision-making processes. All right, you ready? Take a deep breath. Usually at this point, I would put like a funny puppy picture or something to break the ice, but okay, nobody's laughing. Great, really great audience. Okay, so each of us, the folks that did the interviews, are going to introduce to you some of the board members, and we hope that throughout this process you'll get a sense of not only their individual skills and expertise and what we call their secret sauce, but also the ways in which they kind of layer and add on to one another to create an entire complement of what we hope will be a successful board. I'm excited to introduce Roland Englund, who is a PhD. He is the Dean of the Levin College at Cleveland State University. He's got extensive experience in academia and applied research. He's done a good deal of research on the role of anchor institutions in driving community improvement. What we found incredibly powerful in our conversations with him was his clear capacity to navigate the life cycle of grant-making relationships. How do you sort of bring in new ideas, new grantees? How do you break or wean kind of grandfathered relationships, which is a really difficult dance to engage with in the foundation space. We found his conversation to be boundary pushing and forward thinking, and given his experience with the Ford Foundation as their Deputy Director of Community Development, we found that he had an incredible amount of experience to bring to bear in the boardroom. And in particular, when we're looking at what it is that actually drives health and health outcomes, economic and community development are really at the center of what determines someone's health status in the long term. And so he's got a great deal of expertise and knowledge and skills that he could bring to bear. And in terms of secret sauce, that's really hard to read, I'm sorry, but one of the things that we were most impressed by was that although Roland is not a Lakewood resident, he made very clear to us his commitment to the Healthy Lakewood Foundation by expressing that he's already talked to his seniors at Cleveland State and has asked that this be integrated into part of his job title, or his job description, so that engaging with the community, including the Healthy Lakewood Foundation, would be part of what he is supposed to do in the world. And that was evidenced by his willingness to have an interview while he was abroad in South Africa at midnight at a coffee house because he had to unexpectedly go abroad for his job. So we were just remarkably impressed with his whole presentation.
Becca Bass is not yet a Lakewood resident. She will be moving to Lakewood with her family in just a couple of weeks from North Carolina. We were really impressed with her experience in developing and managing human resource systems and felt that that would translate in allowing her to assist with staffing needs of the new foundation. She has experience in nonprofit management, program evaluation, and health and wellness with personnel and HR duties. Her expertise, currently she is working in a program in North Carolina that focuses on children with adverse childhood experiences, and she has an eye in that program toward prevention and intervention. We felt that the fact that she was going to be a brand-new resident really provided fresh eyes for the board, along with her deep experience. She and her husband are both military veterans. They've spent the last 5 years looking for what they call their forever home. So they have kind of traveled around the country looking to see where they might want to live, and they've chosen Lakewood. And they actually spent some time renting, I think, Airbnb or other residence here, and living in neighborhoods, and so really did their homework. She's very research-oriented and a real disciplined and principled individual.
I'm honored to be introducing Kurt Broski this evening as the president and CEO of the LSC. He manages not only the administration for the 6 nonprofit apartment communities, but he engages with those 6 distinct boards as well, which we think will be vital in this role with the new foundation. He's engaged at the highest levels of volunteer service for other local nonprofit boards. He is deeply embedded in the Lakewood senior community and already engaged with BVU's CEO series, and brings a background in accounting and finance to the table as well. He really understands the magnitude of this new Healthy Lakewood Foundation, and one thing that really stood out in his application was the quote that this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to create something so special for Lakewood. And he truly understands what it means to serve on a board, specifically a board chair, really drawing out the talent that you have around the table. So we thought this really put him at the front of the list.
Kristen Creation brings skills in public policy development and government relations. She also is well-versed in community health needs assessments. In fact, she's the expert that we brought to the task force when we were trying to understand that process in greater detail. She is able to interface across multiple, sometimes competing organizations, and that's really a skill that we thought would benefit the foundation. Her expertise, she has experience with communications and social marketing. She said some of that is just because they said, you're going to do this, and so she's also very flexible. And also expertise in equity, diversity, and inclusion. She is a Lakewood resident. She's obviously a woman, and she has uniquely lived in Canada, France, and England, so a bit of a global perspective for us.
And I see that we've used quite a bit of time, and so I want to just point out 1 or 2 things about each of the candidates, if that would be all right, and then we can move into questions and answers.
That would be appreciated.
Okay.
Thanks.
By the way, one of the reasons that we did this, and as I expressed in the email, was that as the 4 interviewers presented the slate, our proposed slate, to the task force, we found that we couldn't possibly understand the full complement unless we were having dialogue and having conversation. Folks said that this process was incredibly useful for them in understanding, so we wanted to bring the same process to you. With that said, I'll just skim through a couple of these. So Melissa Fetterman, who is here today, an incredible human being, an incredible strategic thinker, has expertise in program evaluation and public policy. She's been director of the AIDS Funding Collaborative, and I've had the pleasure of working with her personally over the past several years. As you probably know, HIV and AIDS, the epicenter in Northeast Ohio of HIV and AIDS is in Lakewood, Edgewater, and Glenville, and in particular Lakewood. And she also has a good deal of experience already working in the Lakewood community. She's been working with the mayor actually on perhaps a syringe exchange program on this side of town, which is incredibly important, not only in terms of the opioid crisis, but also in terms of curbing HIV and AIDS. And I think that's all we got to say about her, unless you guys have questions. Is Janine mine, or is that? Okay.
Janine Gurgel has been a member of the task force. She has a lot of experience in nonprofit and for-profit sectors. She is a great strategic planner, especially in the healthcare area. She's worked for North Coast Health and currently works for foundation, managing several family foundations. We have found her on the task force to be incredibly thoughtful, collaborative, and always has done her research. We mentioned her expertise, and in terms of her secret sauce, she's been incredibly active in the Lakewood community and really has a feel for the community and particularly healthcare.
And has the unique experience of being both a grant seeker and a grant maker, which is not something that many folks have. So she's been on both sides of the table, and that's a difficult kind of identity to negotiate.
So I'm really pleased to introduce Heidi Hilty to you. She has an extensive investment management career with Merrill Lynch, an integral part of their team with assets under management of over $1 billion. She has experience in compliance, HR, and administration. She is a long-standing, engaged volunteer throughout many causes in Lakewood. And my favorite quote from her during this process was, "The busier you are, the more you can get done." So we know that she's going to be a hard worker. Kate is mine as well. We were all really impressed when we met Kate, and I know Dan had known her before this process, but I think what really stood out to us as a group when we were meeting with her was she really understands how to operationalize this code of regulations that the task force has put together. She is the sole executive staff for the Brush Foundation. She has many years of prior development and board experience under her belt, and we were very impressed that she's already participated in Philanthropy Ohio's 6-part racial bias training and completed the Racial Equity Institute through Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, which is a program, if you haven't heard of it, has been making its rounds through the nonprofit community and really is changing how people think about racial and equity and inclusivity decisions that they're making. Next, Rick Kem. Was really honored to meet him during this process. He is the executive director for the May Dugan Center, which is a really lovely nonprofit on the near west side of Cleveland. If you are not familiar with it, they do wonderful work. He also has been both a grant seeker and a grant maker with his experience. He is skilled in fundraising, investments, resource management, and stewardship, all skills that we think will be vital to this new board as they're getting off the ground. He is a longtime Lakewood resident and was also raised in Colorado. And Peter Kuhn, who I know professionally, I was really excited to see his name on the list of potential candidates. He is a CPA by trade, but also holds an executive MBA. He was with IMG for many, many years, and his final position there was as CFO, so he brings a wealth of knowledge for that group and for extensive wealth management. He also led their European arm for more than 5 years. He's heavily engaged in the nonprofit community here in the Cleveland area and has led multiple strategic planning processes for those nonprofits. And he was part of the board and actually the board chair when Cleveland Playhouse left its old location closer to Cleveland Clinic's main campus and coordinated their move to Playhouse Square. So he has a number of really important skills that will benefit the new foundation.
Do I get to do this one? Yes. Nailed it. So Erin has been our fearless leader, and I cannot say enough wonderful things about her incredible leadership. She's a consensus builder. She's strategic, she's facilitative. I have truly learned personally, and I think the rest of the task force has learned immensely from her leadership skills. As I mentioned, she's strong in facilitation and group organization. She's an expert, apparently, in team development and management, as we have learned over the past year and a half, though that certainly was not on her resume. She's got a public health background and extensive experience managing public health processes and programs, community engagement, wellness programming, and chronic disease prevention. As I mentioned, she's been the fearless leader of the task force, and I think that's good. Did you add that last bullet? Okay.
Courtney Noster works as a mental health therapist, working with children and adolescents. She's worked both in the home and in the schools, and we're thinking that that may be an area that the new foundation at some point may be addressing. She's also, in her background, worked with immigrants and refugees, worked in community engagement with behavioral health, and has done a lot with equity, diversity, and inclusion. She also is well-versed in social determinants of health, conversation that we had quite a bit around as a task force, and talked a lot about primary prevention and early intervention so that we're addressing issues with our youngest citizens before they become even bigger issues with our older citizens. And she describes herself as a millennial and a member of the LGBTQ community. She has been a resident of Lakewood, is not currently living here, but has a strong desire to return. And she has been highly involved in the community while she was here, is very passionate, and just expressed a deep desire to make a difference. So Chitra Walker, we had a delightful conversation with her. She comes from a health insurance background, working for 3 major health insurance companies and as a healthcare navigator. So it's a little bit different perspective than some of the healthcare provider focused folks that we have on the board. She also is very collaborative in her leadership. She was the only one of the folks that we spoke with that we got an unsolicited reference for. And yeah, several. And so we had to really sit up and take notice when that was the situation. Everyone said that they had worked with her in various capacities, and we would be foolish not to invite her onto the board. She has served on multiple boards and several things throughout Lakewood, and I think through the city, through several of the organizations, so you may already know Chitra. She is herself an immigrant from India and has wonderful stories about her early beginnings. So I look forward to all you getting to know her better.
One of the things I want to say about Chitra, too, is that in addition to being a consensus builder, we really centered our interview around sort of the philosophy of health and the sort of theoretical underpinnings of what creates community and what are the real conditions that set people up for success. And we got very deep into not only her life story, but her views on the connectedness of all things, and it was incredibly insightful. I have the pleasure of introducing Kalila Worley, who is currently the senior organizer for the Greater Cleveland Congregations. So she's heavily involved in the faith-based community and is an organizer by training. She's got a background, not only a master's degree in public service and nonprofit management, but has been deeply involved in education and education reform, both here in Northeast Ohio as well as Chicago. Among all of the candidates, I would argue, Kalila demonstrated an incredible depth and capacity toward connectedness. And as we had described last time, one of the most important qualities of a board member is connections, and the ability to make connections, the ability to connect ideas, the ability to cross ideas, cross collaboration, see connections where other people don't. We were impressed as Kalila introduced herself, not only introduced herself, but learned truly the life story of the security guard at the front door. And she was the only candidate to ask all the interviewers about us. And we just found her to be incredibly, that skill to be incredibly useful in building consensus and collaboration across a highly skilled board. Is Sharonda mine? Cool. Sharonda's also incredibly lovely. She is relatively new, only been in Lakewood a few years. A young professional. She's a city planner for the city of Cleveland. Many of the things that were most impressive about her, in addition to her background in understanding the built environment and the way in which our actual environment bears on our health, was her ability to articulate the relationships between entrepreneurship and youth development and long-term health outcomes. We also found in her a great potential towards strategic grant making. She had some ideas about what was already happening in Lakewood, some of the new developments happening, and she said, I wonder what it would be like to be on the board and ask them if they'd want to partner with us on some projects. We're like, wow, it takes grant makers 20 years to have that skill to understand strategy and to create projects or assist in the creation of projects. Of course, we want to thank the entire task force. Those that are highlighted in purple are those that took part in the task, or rather in the committee that helped with this board selection. Those that are asterisked are the task force members who applied and then dropped, as a result of submitting an application, no longer took part in the committee, but were at least part in the first half of our work. And with that, of course, you know where to find information. I'm here and Julie's here, and we'd love to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. That was an incredible presentation, as we've come to expect from this group. Very, very thorough and very indicative of the thoroughness of the underlying work, so I really appreciate that. I guess what I'd like to do this evening is for council members, kind of procedural purposes, I think that we, as I see it, have an opportunity tonight for some discussion and deliberation, although probably not, given the time, an extensive opportunity for that. So if council, I think, wanted to take, you know, obviously more than an hour or something for this discussion, we would need to make some kind of provision for that. And my plan or expectation had been to possibly do that at our next, either before our next council meeting on the 18th at a committee of the whole meeting, or short of that during the actual council meeting on the 18th. We do have a committee of the whole scheduled to meet coming up a week from today on the 11th. However, we've already got a number of items on the agenda for that evening. Perhaps we could add some more time to that evening, but I just want to kind of begin our discussions tonight with that backdrop so that we have an understanding of what time we have to work with, at least as far as the month of June goes. Without further discussion from me, is there any additional discussion or questions from council members? Councilman Rader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to voice my thanks again for all the work you put in and rearranging your schedules, all of you, to come out tonight. And I know a lot of people that you've recommended, and I know they're amazing people. And I think I'll defer a lot of my comments and questions. I do have a lot of questions, and I appreciate you taking those questions. And I also appreciate the time you guys took out to meet with a few of us during the week. It really did mean a lot that you've taken so much, again, time, which is the most valuable thing we have, to see this through and to come out and stand up for these people who you obviously believe in. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thanks. Any additional comments or questions from council? Councilman Bullock.
Mr. President, thank you. I've got a number of things. The first question I have is for you. Is council calendar on this? So we're talking tonight about one element of many elements that are involved in the work of the task force and the eventual creation of the new foundation that council is being asked in one piece of legislation to approve multiple things. I'm frankly inclined to not approve it all in one fell swoop, but to break out the different components of the task force in different actions, or at least in different deliberations by council. But what is your anticipated timeline, if there's any update? Because I know that we don't have time tonight to get into, several different categories.
Thanks. Well, I don't know that I have much update from when we discussed this at the last meeting, at which I think we talked about that there's a possibility that the funds could become available to this organization as soon as sometime in mid-July, if my understanding is correct. So ideally, when that happens, the organization would be in existence and staffed.
Okay. Thank you. My hope and recommendation to my colleagues is that we continue to do thoughtful, substantive work as a body that is deliberative and has decision-making authority on all of these matters. The task force has done great work, has put in a lot of thought. At a minimum, we ought to catch up fully to what they've done with the help of, now I'm learning tonight, not one, but two professional consultants. So I'd like to be able to do that. My expectation before I cast a vote is that I fully understand not only what's being recommended, but what wasn't recommended, and the context of the work of the new foundation in which all this fits. I've been working to get my hands around those questions, but I know that we haven't talked about it as a council because here we are in a second or third meeting, and this is a deep topic. So I don't envision myself supporting a process whereby we might do a quick en-bloc approval. I want us to have the time, space, and bandwidth to work through these questions.
I appreciate that concern, and I thank you for bringing that forward this evening. I guess I would follow up with what, if you have a little bit more detail as to what you think that process might look like.
Sure. Thank you. So we began a good substantive discussion last time, and we got an effective presentation and an overview of the kind of context, and that was helpful. Among the other points that I'd like to spend more time on were some we talked about it on the way out. There was attention to appropriate turnover in the board of trustees for the new foundation. There was a reference to term limits. I didn't see term limits in the language.
The Code of Regulations, excuse me, allows for three-year terms max with no stipulation toward joining the board once again. So it's 9 years total. The only exception would be if someone is elected to board chair, they can serve an additional 3-year term.
Okay, so that's a great, important specific that I'd like to spend some more time on. I didn't see that in the documents, but maybe I just missed it. On top of that, there's a proposal I'd like to make sure is called out clearly that whatever health plans or strategies or analyses that are produced by the task force by the foundation every so many years be shared in an appropriate way so that the public and the community and other nonprofits or even potential grantees may be able to make use of it. I suspect that's the intent. I didn't see that called out in the documents.
Sure. So there are two ways in which that's called out in the documents. The first is the requirement for a community engagement and accountability plan, which includes processes for articulating all sorts of ways of including the community and how problems are identified and solutions are created. The second is at least one public annual meeting with encouragement, of course, throughout in terms of articulating the values of transparency and accountability. It's very clear that those are the underlying principles, but in terms of operationalizing it, it is at least one public meeting per year.
Okay. There could be, though, the sharing of strategy documents or data or things along those lines. I don't know yet, without getting deeper into it, whether there would be privacy concerns to respect there, or maybe just some of it ought to be a proprietary analysis that the task force, the foundation owns as opposed to the community. But that's an example of a couple things that I got into so far that I would like more time to unpack,
Sure. And in terms
at least
of
with the council.
Pardon me. In terms of that particular issue, as we had suggested at our last meeting, we hope to create a sufficiently broad framework within which the board could take ownership and operationalize what we had articulated in terms of values and operational procedures. So something as narrow, for example, as sharing strategic processes. We had talked about kind of narrowly what would need to be shared or what should be shared with the community, but we felt that the articulation of the values was strong enough and sufficiently directive that the board can make decisions about what specific things they share with the community. So whether or not that's their strategy documents or whether or not that's all of their board minutes or whatever that looks like, we thought that we would best leave that up to the board.
I understand. Well, we're engaged in an informal Q&A here, but
Sure.
But with the pleasure of the chair, or Mr. President, rather, that is a thoughtful way to go about it. I still may want to see council guarantee an appropriately worded, somewhat higher minimum requirement of sharing. But again, that's an example of a thoughtful facet of the many complex issues that I'd like the chance for City Council to deliberate upon. That's number one. Number two, we talked about this the last time. Ultimately, what we're really trying to do is have effective work on health, broadly conceived, by a new foundation. And I'd like us to deliberate a bit and really learn a bit further what the analysis that the task force spent a lot of good hours and months unearthing, to the degree that you were able to bring that into focus, which is partly but not fully because you're the task force making framework recommendations, not the board doing the specifics. Nevertheless, I think there's useful public policy insights for City Council to gain by understanding here are priority health conditions, here's the tool set, here's how we might frame the new board. to ultimately be successful and highly impactful. I'd like to spend some time on that subject, and I think the task force did get into some of that subject matter. Although I do hear you loud and clear. What you reported last time was we got this far, and we thought after a certain point, this was the water's edge for the task force as opposed to the board. So that's another full discussion in my view. Okay, it's a discussion, but that discussion having a more focused and clear working understanding of the ultimate work to be conducted by this new foundation would then therefore helpfully inform the other decisions that City Council is being asked to make or approve or amend.
I appreciate, so I've heard, I think, two topics so far, and one is some specifics under the Code of Regs, so a Code of Regs discussion. And then I've heard, I think, a second discussion which would generally be focused on the tenor of what work is appropriately left to the future board versus what work was done by the task force and how was that determination made. Am I understanding those two issues?
Not quite, but I appreciate the spirit of your clarification. What I'm getting at is ultimately what do we understand to be the angle of attack or potential several angles of attack that the new foundation would be making decisions about on health conditions. In other words, they could go, we got into some of this last time, but again, that was a brief touch upon a very deep and worthy policy question that I personally, this council member anyway, would like to dig in a bit on. Not the least of which because we have human services in the city. We have a EMS that is engaged in health services. We ought to know this stuff. So, so it's the work of the new health foundation and what it may choose to. What are its choices in the next 5 years to be most effective for the community? I know that this task force didn't attempt to, and I think that's admirable and the right decision, didn't attempt to dictate that at all, but I'd like to, for us all to also really understand that as clearly as we can.
Thanks. I think I have a clear understanding of the two topics. I guess the next question is how long do we see each of those discussions taking, potentially? So do we think an hour per discussion would suffice? Do we expect additional time?
Mr. Chair, to be frank, I wouldn't put time limits on it. I would expect it could take 5 minutes or 5 hours. It could take 5 minutes or 5 weeks. I think that City Council, if we're a deliberative body and council members have interest in it, should have the space to dig in and dig in deeply. Now, I don't anticipate that it would take 5 weeks, but if City Council is going to be a primary policy-making body, co-equal with the administration, then especially on a once-in-a-generation decision that's so important, that we all agree is so important, then we ought to have the space and time and perhaps paid consultant bandwidth to be able to do our end of the job. That's my view. And
Thanks.
There's a version of that also for, this was an excellent presentation tonight and great set of recommendations of personnel tonight. The questions, and I know and trust many of the people that were recommended and don't find fault in the logic. What I do, though there is an expectation that I had that City Council would be doing the work that the task force has been asked to do. And so I would expect that we, at a minimum, we also assess and evaluate the full group of 80 and have a chance to interact one-on-one with the recommended group of 15. I want to understand, and tonight was a great beginning, what went into the recommendations, but part of what we've got is not the group that was recommended, but the balance of the 81 that weren't recommended. That's part of the context.
Like to review all of those applications
What
as well.
I'm addressing my remarks to my council colleagues. That's, I'm giving 1 in 7 council members' opinion that ought to be part of the ambition of a thoughtful decision that City Council ought to be doing. And I want to be sensitive to the fact that I think you've done a fantastic job collectively as a task force at doing the work that you were invited to do, and thank you for that. And I do admire and respect the quality of the thought that you put into that, and not only the thought, but the experience that you collectively bring to exactly this task. So I appreciate that, too. So that's not to negate anything you've recommended tonight, but that is to say that this council member would like City Council to make sure that our minds and decisions and judgments are fully in the game.
I appreciate those comments a great deal, and I do think that additional discussion is warranted and is appropriate. I guess I would state for my own view, again, as one of 7, I guess I don't see it as that appropriate or, frankly, that practical for this body to, say, review all 80 applications. I think it's important for this body to take on these recommendations thoughtfully, considerately, conservatively, but I also think that it's important that this body not supplant its own work for that of the task force or to redo work that's essentially already been done by the task force. And so I'm not saying that I am resistant to having additional meetings or to having additional discussion, but what I am saying is I think it's important that headed into those discussions, we as a council do get a sense of what timeline we do want to try and deliver a product on, because I think that, to be fair, again, we're not going to give short shrift to a major issue impacting the community for a very long period of time. However, I think we also need to be cognizant of the fact, for example, one consideration could be that we're not the only regulator here. So if we were to take 5 weeks per discussion or 5 weeks for additional discussion, and then come back with significant modifications that then the other regulators would then have to in turn consider before assenting to, it really potentially starts to push out the point at which this foundation could become an operable entity, and perhaps that's the will of council. But I think that we would be remiss if we didn't look at these considerations holistically up front when we discuss that. The other thing that weighs a little bit on my mind is that, given the climate, I think that there is wisdom in having a lot of this work done by a body that was assembled by a bunch of collective wisdom from a wide gamut
By
of the
you,
community.
City Council.
Yes, yeah, and the administration as well, in particular. So my point, though, is that, particularly given some of the sensitivities at play, I think that there is a strong desire on the part of the community and others to make sure that this is not a process that's construed as one that's politicized. And I know that we're not doing that by deliberating thoughtfully on the work of the task force, but I flag that as an issue because, in reading the work of the task force and in following it, I know that that was something that came up in community interviews and was expressed. So we both, I think, need to have a conversation about that process so that the community can understand in a fully transparent and open way, above and beyond the access that they already had directly to that process, what that process entailed. But I guess I don't want there to be a perception that council is then manipulating the work of the task force, for lack of a better term. Okay, thank you.
Well, it was
for-
our understanding, and I'm just, it was our understanding, like I said, that we said that 18 months ago, our task force, the members of our task force, were chosen and selected and appointed by City Council, by the mayor's office, under thoughtful consideration of, I think, 50 applications of people coming in from the Lakewood community. So to us, that was, we trust you and the work that you're going to be undertaking, which took 18 months and took many hours, to help deliver some recommendations and proposal to us, because we are trusting you as the experts in this and as the voice of the community. And so I think that's really what we've delivered to you. We can certainly continue answering specific questions. A lot of the points you brought up, Councilman Bullock, we have that information. If it's articulated to us, like, I want to know what you guys talked about in terms of community health needs in Lakewood, we would be able to point you to minutes, documents, the videos of the speakers that we had come in and talk to us. We can lay all that out if that's articulated to us as a need. So we're certainly open to that. But I would be remiss, and I'd be doing a disservice to the task force if I didn't kind of hit home the point that this role was really entrusted to the task force to complete. And that's what we're presenting to you this evening and what we presented to you a couple of weeks ago. But we can certainly clear up misunderstandings or questions however you see fit. But in terms of trying to reinvent the wheel and duplicate some of the efforts that were already made, it just seems like you wouldn't want to spend all your time doing that because you didn't want to spend all your time doing that in the first place, which is why you had us do it.
I'm going to give Councilman Bullock an opportunity to respond, and then Councilman O'Malley had a comment after that.
In no way, a couple things. First of all, repeat again, thank you for your work. It's great work. If you hear a desire to deliberate further on the work, that is not a expression of doubting the quality of your recommendations, but the work, I think, that was requested was to make recommendations, and now it's our turn to, or it's our responsibility, frankly, to thoughtfully review the recommendations. That's what we're doing. It doesn't always mean that a recommendation is 100% agreed to. Often it is, and it'll just depend. So, yes, it's duplicative for a deliberative body to deliberate and review and double-check the work and go through the same processes. That's kind of, frankly, the checks and balances of government. And so I'm sorry if that's a frustrating message for at least me to be saying. That's not the intent here. What I'm really talking about is to my colleagues about what I hope council does in terms of the rigor of our own work. That's it. So thank you for your work, and we do appreciate what you've done.
And to clarify, we are happy that you're taking interest in the recommendations, that you want to research and look into them further. But what we're saying is there really isn't a reason for you to go and try to, for example, figure out what the community health needs of Lakewood are and make sure that we're in line with those, because that's all information and things that we've already gathered throughout this process. And we have that readily available that we could hand over at any time or discuss at any meeting that you invite us to. I mean, we've shown up to anything that you invite us to, and we will continue doing that if it makes, if it helps clarify why we made the decisions that we made in putting the recommendations forth to you.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments and that response. Councilman O'Malley, did you have a?
I'll be brief because we're getting late here and we've got a full agenda. But just so just in terms of the process, so there's another regulator, which is the Lakewood Hospital Association, and I'm just wondering what communication either you, Council President, or the mayor have had with them, and what our process is going forward.
So representatives from the task force just met with regulators from LHA, as well as the mayor and your legal and the council's legal counsel. We understand that LHA is ready to move on their decision-making process within the next couple weeks. They spoke about potentially even a meeting as early as June 13th.
Meeting, just their meeting?
LHA's meeting, yeah, that's right. I mean, they certainly aren't bound to that, and that was nothing was set in stone, but they, I had every positive indication that they were ready to move in their decision-making process. And Susan, I don't know if Susan has anything to add or the mayor has anything to add, but that was just before this meeting.
I think, if I may, I think they're very reflective of and respectful for the process that was employed here. Both the logic of and the comprehensive nature of it, the thoroughness, the disciplined approach, They recognized that they could not create the body of work and the results that came from it. They also, like you, want to spend some time to make sure that their thinking, as they generally are inclined to believe it to be so, is as thorough as they are. They want to work through the logic of it, but they express no interest in duplicating it. You know, and I would say, from my standpoint as a fellow obligor here and a regulator, that when we, in fact, delegate, which is what we believe we do, and we do it all the time here, we ask our citizens to share their expertise. We ask them to give their time and their efforts and their experiences, and they shape significant issues for us to address. In this case, the body of work had to be fairly specific. It had to be actionable documents that reflect the strategies and the comprehensive nature of the subject. We also understood, because of the nature of the question of how we populate this first board, that a thorough, disciplined approach was the best way to gain confidence and acceptance by the community. So that's what they did. I mean, it was a very disciplined approach. They identified the criteria. They took all these folks. They assessed them against the criteria. They used their best judgments to narrow it down and then add their qualitative input based on their speculation of who would actually contribute. I have to tell you, I'm convinced that I could, in my best day, couldn't exceed anything they've done. I know that, both in terms of the expansiveness and their collective wisdom that they brought to bear. I'm fairly convinced, frankly, they can't exceed your ability to do this because of their work. Whether you can equal it or not is an interesting question, but I don't think any of us could exceed it. So the question really is the element of trust here and confidence of their work. And I would say, for one, that I have the highest respect and confidence that the city of Lakewood will be exceptionally well served by the recommendations they put forth. We can fine-tune some points, perhaps, although probably not many. But there's a point in time where we have to assess trust and confidence on our peers, and these folks are clearly our peers, in my opinion.
Thanks.
And then also, Mayor, I don't know if you were just passing this along, but you gave us this revised copy of the Code of Regulations before the meeting. Is there a marked-up version of this?
Yeah, in fact, this is a reflection of some changes that came from the conversation with the Lakewood Hospital Association. They had some minor points that made sense, and I would,
Yeah, I
Susan?
could speak to the changes from the last time. As to the.
If we
code of-
could just briefly, I'm sorry, if we could just briefly, because
Okay.
I do need to get back to our kind of procedural discussion as to when we're actually going to talk about these things in more detail. But if you have a brief update that you'd like to share in response to
The changes are
Councilman
very
O'Malley.
minor.
Sure.
Okay, as to the Code of Regulations, Lakewood Hospital Association requested that the chair be changed to president, which is just a matter of what the Ohio Code calls the person, so there's essentially no changes in the code. As to the articles, we made it very clear, we changed the purpose to the purpose that was in the trust, in the master agreement, so that was changed a little bit. And we also made clear that upon dissolution, that any funds were to go to another 501c3 serving Lakewood community, which it had not said before. So they were very minor changes.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that next time. Thank you. And thank you all. Very impressive work and impressive slate of proposed candidates. Thanks.
Thank you. If we could, Councilman Litton, and then Councilman Rader, and then if we could get some kind of resolution on when we'll next meet, that would be.
I will be swift and skip half of my notes in favor of future talks. You guys are great. I'll spare you all of it. I ran out of superlatives anyway, because you've done wonderful work for us. I'm excited by the names I know. I'm excited by the names I don't know, thanks to your descriptions. Question for our president first. By staffed by July, I assume you meant the board being selected.
Correct. Yes, not the organization. Yes. Thank you for that clarification.
And then, and so sort of in the interest of Councilman Bullock's comments, Dan, Julie, were applicants briefed? I assume so, but were they briefed on council's need to weigh in on this? And I ask that because we've got some good candidates here, and I don't want them feeling baited and switched or led down a path they weren't,
You mean like the task force? No.
that
sorry.
wasn't clear to them. You're welcome.
Sort
And nor do I want them thinking they'll be raked through the coals again or what have you.
So there was some early, in some of the email communications, we had made reference to the regulators, and in interviews, we had made reference to those who are ultimately making decisions. Basically, the communications that were made were a general timeline that we had hoped to propose the board slate to you all by about this point, early June, with the anticipation in accordance with the master agreement that the foundation would be open by the opening of the Family Health Center, which is, I believe, July 11th. So I do believe that we are contractually bound to that. So that is what has been communicated. They understand that there are other people that need to make the ultimate decisions, and we have framed it as part of the board slate. But I certainly hope there doesn't appear to, or there are no feelings of a bait and switch, and I'm feeling actually a little guilty about that. But thank you for the question.
Thanks for all your work.
Thank you. Councilman Anderson, I believe you had a quick.
Just real quick for the administration, and it's to a point that you made earlier, Mr. President, regarding the first allotment of sizable contribution or transition of funds to the foundation. I believe the $200,000 was already allocated to the task force to help in the creation of the task force and to get to this point. I'm curious as to whether or not we know off the top of our head what the balance is of that, and is there part of that money still available that's going to be transitioned to the foundation? I'm just curious where we are with that.
I know it hasn't all been spent. Actually, maybe you might know that better than we do.
Right. Our expenses have mainly been with the consultants that we've used, and we've come nowhere near the $200,000 amount.
That account is the holding place for the first major release of funds to what will be the foundation.
The city, the first disbursement of the $200,000 has been received by the city and is held in trust. So as the task force has experienced expenses for their different professional support, it's been paid out of that trust. So it's on deposit with the city. In the event that the foundation is not established when the disbursements per the master agreement, then we would need to amend the trust agreement that we have, and then the city would hold that in trust, and then when the foundation is up and running, the city would disperse those funds to that trust.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess as a procedural note, this was referred to Committee of the Whole as of May 21st, so we don't need an additional referral back, is my understanding, correct, Law Director Butler? Sorry to get you off mic there.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. All right, given that that's the case, we'll take it up again, I imagine, in Committee of the Whole. As was mentioned, on the 11th, we do have a Committee of the Whole meeting scheduled, which is currently, has an agenda populated by some planning and development items, some of which are also time-sensitive, after which we have a Finance Committee meeting, I believe, starting at 7, which would mean that the next opportunity, also I believe that on the 11th, we've got a task member or task force member or two out of town, possibly. So potentially the 18th would be the next available opportunity to discuss if we could do a Committee of the Whole prior to that, Council. But I would, I guess, open that suggestion up to the floor for their thoughts.
And if I could just reiterate
Sure.
Aaron's point, and to the question, Council President, that I had emailed you last week and reiterated yesterday, if there's specific questions that the council has that we can come prepared, we would very much appreciate.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for driving that point home. I know that a number of council members have taken you up on that offer to various extents, and that certainly for what I don't want to call them simple, but for requests that are merely informational and not really of a kind of deliberative or qualitative nature, I think that that's a great way to go to help us use our time most efficiently when we're meeting together. Any other council members' questions or comments about the suggestion to take this up next on the 18th?
I would ask that you remind us of your website where all this information is. Yeah, there you go.
Right up there.
Yeah.
Yes. That's onelakewood.com/. wellness-foundation-task-force, / Okay. Then it sounds like there being no additional discussion of our next discussion being on the 18th. I'll move to defer item 3, resolution 9004-18. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to defer? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes. Thank you again all so much for your hard work to date and tonight. That brings us to item 1.
Public Works Committee report regarding Resolution 9002-18.
Thank you. Councilman Rader.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you all might remember, there is a property on Edgecliff Drive, and towards the end of the property lining the lake, there is a storm sewer that cuts directly through that property. It's an empty lot. The owner wants to the owner wants to move that so that he could potentially, whoever he sells it to, could potentially build. This resolution is basically an ordinance that creates an easement. There is no current easement there in the portion of the property where this new storm sewer will be directed. One of the big questions we had was this is definitely going to be something and the answer is going to be this is something that the owner will pay for, will be the installation of this new storm drain to replace the over 100-year-old storm drain that's there. So we did recommend this for adoption. Be happy to answer any questions. Also, Director Benno is here, and he was in the meeting, so if you have any more questions relating to this, but again, we did recommend that it was adopted, so thank you.
Thank you. Move to receive and file that report.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to receive and file?
Mr. President.
Yes, Councilman Anderson.
Great recap of the meeting. I thought it was substantive. Thank you, Director Benno, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for bringing us through that interesting conversation. So I'm just glad that we're helping residents make improvements, hopefully make improvements to the city, and they see City Hall as a partner in some of these things. So that's one of the points I took away from this. So thanks again.
Thank you. Any additional discussion on the motion to receive and file? Hearing none. All those in favor of receiving and filing say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 2, resolution number 9002-18, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an easement agreement with JLL Properties LTD, an Ohio limited liability company governing the rights of the parties relative to a parcel located at Erie Cliff Drive, Lakewood, Ohio, 44107, parcel number 311-13-113, which grants the city of Lakewood access to the parcel for construction and ongoing maintenance of the underlying sewer lines for a payment of $1.
Move to adopt.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to adopt? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item number 3, resolution, item number 4, Rules and Ordinances Committee report regarding legislation to implement the Third Amended Charter.
Thank you. Councilwoman George.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I will keep this brief for time's sake, but we had a number of proposed ordinances and rules and ordinances, all stemming from the charter, which passed on November 7th. We had 9 ordinances we reviewed, all of which we would like to adopt at the next meeting. So that's our brief update there.
Move to receive and file that report.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to receive and file? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item number,
Pardon me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't sneak this in before you voted. I just wanted to point out for the council's consideration that one of those 9 ordinances, and I thank Councilwoman George for the report, is going to be amended. So, and the committee did consider that amendment as a substitute version in committee and adopted and recommended its adoption out.
Thank you for that clarification. Any need to refile that report or anything procedurally? Okay.
No.
All right, great. Thank you for that update.
item number 5, ordinance number 29-18, an ordinance enacting various sections of the codified ordinances of the City of Lakewood in order to codify certain provisions with respect to financial processes in the city.
Move to defer.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to defer? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 6, communication from Mayor Summers regarding Common Grounds conversation, acceptance of grant money from Cleveland Foundation.
Thank you. Mayor Summers.
Thank you, members of council, members of the audience. I just want to bring your attention to the fact that we are hosting a Cleveland Foundation event, Common Grounds Community Conversation, on June 24th. That's a Sunday. It is located at the Women's Pavilion. We have received a $1,000 grant from the Cleveland Foundation. I wanted to acknowledge that to provide resources, particularly food, for the event. So the purpose of this acknowledgement is to bring your attention to the event and also to let you know that we will receive a grant from the Cleveland Foundation to support it. Vince Franz, one of our great community members, is going to be our host of that night, and he will be our facilitator. And the theme is the importance of place to our health, our security, and our future. So hopefully we can all engage in that conversation.
Excellent. Thank you. Move to receive and file that communication. Second. A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to receive and file? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 7, communication from Finance Director Pay regarding 2018 second quarter transfers and advances.
Thank you. Director Pay.
Thank you. Dear members of council, the 2018 second quarter transfer ordinance reflects 25% of the total anticipated transfers between funds that were included within the 2018 appropriations. I respectfully request that this ordinance is passed on second reading on June 18th so that it can be posted with the month end for June. Thank you.
Thank you. Move to receive and file that communication. Second. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to receive and file? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 8, ordinance number 30-18, an ordinance authorizing the transfer in advance of certain funds.
Thank you. I guess, Councilman O'Malley, would you entertain a referral to Finance Committee?
Yes, and given the time sensitivity, we can take this up at our meeting on June 11th. We'll ask to amend the notice. Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, I would move to refer ordinance 30-18 to Finance Committee. Second. A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to refer? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 9, communication from Finance Director Pay regarding 2019 tax budget, 2019 tax advance resolution, and 2019 tax rate resolution.
Thank you. Director Pay.
Thank you. Attached are 3 resolutions that kick off the 2019 budget season. They are required by the Ohio Revised Code and the Cuyahoga County Fiscal Officer. The first is the tax budget, the second is the tax advance resolution, and the third is the tax rate, all of which set into place the city's maintenance of the property taxes, which the county collects on our behalf, which is 17.4 mils, and then one of the resolutions permits to take advances on that. So I can discuss further in committee.
Thank you. Move to receive and file that communication.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to receive and file? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 10, resolution number 9006-18, approving the tax budget of the City of Lakewood, Ohio for the year 2019 and authorizing the filing of the same with the Cuyahoga County Fiscal Officer.
Move to refer to Finance.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to refer to Finance Committee? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 11, resolution number 9007-18, a resolution requesting the Cuyahoga County Fiscal Officer to draw and the Cuyahoga County Treasurer to pay to the City of Lakewood Director of Finance in advance of all real personal property and estate taxes and special assessments collected in the year 2019 in such amounts as may be requested and available.
Move to refer to Finance.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to refer to Finance? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 12, resolution number 9008-18, a resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the County Fiscal Officer.
Move to refer to Finance.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to refer to Finance? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 13, communication from Finance Director Pay regarding contracting authority amendment, and appropriations ordinances.
Director Pay.
Thanks again. Dear members of council, as discussed during the deliberations regarding the One Lakewood Place term sheet, the following ordinances increase contracting authority by $7 million and appropriation by $7.2 million for the abatement and demolition expenses anticipated at the former Lakewood Hospital property to prepare a development-ready site. Please forward to the committee of your choosing. Thank you.
Thank you. Move to receive and file that communication. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to receive and file the communication? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 14, ordinance number 43-17A, an ordinance amending ordinance 43-17 adopted December 18, 2017, authorizing the mayor, director of public safety, the director of public works, the director of law, the director of finance, and/or purchasing manager to enter into contracts for professional services and to advertise for bids and enter into contracts for the purchase of repair, maintenance, and operating supplies, services, and equipment as authorized by the 2018 appropriation ordinance and the administrative code of the city of Lakewood with the lowest and best bidder or bidders, or as otherwise provided by law.
Thank you. With this ordinance, it strikes me that this could probably be appropriate as an appropriation for Finance Committee or for Committee of the Whole as it relates to the One Lakewood Place development. Do either council members or directors have a strong feeling one way or the other?
Mr. President.
Yes, Councilmember O'Malley.
I wouldn't feel at all slighted if we'd rather this be in Committee of the Whole.
Okay. Any other council members' thoughts? Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Councilman
Mr.
Bullock.
President, rather, I'd simply recommend keeping things simple and referring it to finance. It's a ministerial measure, although I think there is a valid question about how much of the total amount ought to be authorized unless and until we understand the time frame for the expected expenditure. But if we're going to have a robust committee, the whole discussion about the task force recommendations, that that'll take up a bunch of time.
Okay.
That's just my opinion.
Thanks. Yes, Councilman O'Malley.
My only deference was this ordinance was somewhat unexpected when I came to learn of it. I thought that we'd be reviewing the bids directly, and so I figured if this is the last action that we're going to take as a council on this matter, that Committee of the Whole would rather take it up. But if you'd rather it be in finance, that's fine by me.
I would say that as
and of course, everybody would be able to come to finance and speak up, and council as a whole would get to vote on it. So I have no preference, I guess.
Okay.
Is my
thanks. Yeah, I also have a strong indifference. So is there any other question or opinion from council? If not, I move to refer to finance.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to refer to finance? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 15, ordinance number 31-18, an ordinance to establish appropriations for current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Lakewood, State of Ohio for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2018.
Move to refer to finance. A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to refer to Finance Committee? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 16, communication from Planning and Development Director Sylvester regarding authority to sell real property.
Thank you. Director Sylvester.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will also be brief. This ordinance is related to what is known as the Birdtown Infill Project, and specifically the authority to sell the 2 affordable units that are funded by HUD. So that's 2107 Robin and 2111 Robin, both constructed by Payne & Payne. They are just rounding out the completion of the construction, and we are prepared to go to market. So it'd be great to talk about this at Housing Committee or another committee of your choosing.
Thank you. Move to receive and file that communication.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to receive and file?
Yes, Mr. President, thanks for the time. Just a question of the Planning Director. The action that I recall us approving previously on this was related to what? The approval of funds for the construction, and that's a different action than this one, which would be to sell, to affirm or authorize the sale after.
Yeah, great question, Councilman. The other ordinance related to this was actually the authority to sell the 2 private market lots, which are right next door.
Right.
And so this is for the 2 affordable units that we built first before we wanted to put them on sale. The other 2 are land projects first to go onto the marketplace.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments or anything on the motion to receive and file? Hearing none. All those in favor of receiving and filing say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes.
Item 17, ordinance number 32-18, ordinance authorizing and directing the Director of Planning and Development, the mayor, to enter into an agreement with a licensed real estate broker to market for sale the real property located at 2115 Robin Avenue, Lakewood, Ohio, and 2117 Robin Avenue, Lakewood, Ohio, for a period of 120 days pursuant to Section 155.07 of the codified ordinances.
Thank you. Director Sylvester, I know we don't want to flood the Lakewood market with available real estate, but what's the time sensitivity on this action?
Not a ton. I would say if we could get it done before council goes on recess, it would be okay.
All right, great. Thank you. In light of that and your previous comment, then, I would move to refer ordinance 32-18 to Housing Committee. There's a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion to refer to Housing? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? That motion passes. And that brings us to the end of our docket agenda this evening. We do not have public comment this evening, a little birdie told me, and we'll turn it over to the administration for any announcements from the administration.
I think we're done in.
Okay. Thank you. As far as council goes, Councilman Rader.
I just have one question, just because thank you.
Sure.
I see it out there on the internet, so I want to address it, and I want to see if the mayor may want to weigh in, or the administration or Bryce. But I see that Carnegie may be, according to a blog, according to Facebook, leading towards the high-rise option, the 18-story option. That could be made up, it may not be, but I want to know if you're aware of this, and maybe if you have any thoughts as to if that's going to be the new plan, I guess.
Yeah, you're referring to Ken Pendergrass expansive.
I don't know him. It seems like some of the news outlets did pick it up.
The answer is we don't know, and he doesn't know. But I think he was identifying the fact that the options were before us, and that's exactly where they are today. Yeah, we're not anywhere near that issue being clarified. Bryce, do you have any more to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would even further clarify it. At this point, they're still going towards the mid-rise plan. If the market can support us building up there, we're going to consider it. But at this stage, I would say the mid-rise plan is what they're going for. That high-rise plan is out there on the interweb, so I haven't talked to him, but I think he just grabbed it from somewhere.
Okay. I thank you. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that.
We've got Councilmember Litton and then Councilmember George.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to repeat something I've said on numerous communications channels, that as the hospital has stood for over 100 years as a place where people have received health care in the city of Lakewood, in Ward 3 specifically, I am actively seeking ways to honor that site before we transition it to One Lakewood Place. And so if anybody out there has ideas on ways to do that, we're all ears. Ideas have included, final tours, use of bricks or other pieces of the facility, a group photo of anyone born in the building or who's worked there, things like that. But keep those ideas coming. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman George.
Thank you. And just to continue on both Councilman Rader and Councilman Litton's about the downtown development, I was wondering if maybe we could get perhaps a monthly, just brief update at a council or committee of the whole meeting, just so we can all kind of be on the same page and know where we're at. If that was something procedurally doable, just so we can kind of know what's going on a little bit.
Sure. I'll say for my part that at various points we've had quasi-regular, semi-regular director updates, but certainly for this project in particular and Director Sylvester and Planning and Development, I think it would make sense. And I'd be happy to entertain that either on the floor of a council meeting once a month or in a committee of the whole once a month. Director Sylvester, your thoughts on that?
Happy to.
Okay.
We can do email updates too if you guys are swamped on your dockets. Whatever works for you guys, we're happy to do.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't thinking anything longer than a 5-minute, just, this is where we are, I think it would be helpful. So.
Okay. Sounds good. Maybe if we could plan for an email update, and then what I'd like to do is maybe provide at one of those meetings, 5 or 10 minutes for any additional follow-up questions. So that way we can hopefully have the information and then use that time for any necessary discussion about what that update says. Okay, great.
Mr. President.
Yes, Councilman Bullock.
I want to thank the administration team for a very successful Meet the Trucks this past Saturday on a number of regards. First of all, Director Benno, you did a great thing by having the construction of what I dubbed the pirate ship completed just in the nick of time, and it was a rock star success, such to the point that you had adults chasing their kids up there, which is probably the only way you get the adults to do exercise. So we're onto something here for the Healthcare Task Force. So that was great. I know you used the same event last year to get a lot of the other work completed in Kids Cove. So home run. And then, of course, police and fire were both there and very courteous alongside the public works trucks. So it's just a real happy moment in Lakewood. That's not new, but I do appreciate it anew as a new father. And then I'm looking at the huge, long list of wonderful community events we have all summer long that Shannon Strachan sent around the movies and the Shakespeare Festival and the bandstand and on and on. And it really underscores what a rich community we have. So I appreciate that, and thanks for the work.
Thank you. Councilman O'Malley.
Just quickly want to acknowledge the Planning and Development Department and the respective boards and commissions therein for the implementation of our body art ordinance. We've had several of those businesses open up or preparing to open up. On my way up here tonight, I stopped into Olympus Tattoos, which is, they've done I got a tour through there, a beautiful job renovating a long vacant storefront just steps from City Hall here. And the owner there worked for a long time at one of the most reputable shops in town, the owner of which actually came and testified and helped us out as we were learning about this, and now in a spirit of entrepreneurship is opening up on his own. So thanks to everyone who worked hard on that. I see former Councilman Marks here who shepherded that through as well, and glad to see we've had a number of new businesses open up in our city as a result of the passage of that ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you.
The total is, Council President, is 4.
Wow.
So there's 4. 3 of them are very close to opening. So, and the 4th is lagging just behind. So that's 4 storefronts that have filled up ever since the legislation was passed just a few months ago.
That's great. I won't belabor the point, but I was also going to say, great Meet the Trucks this year. Best birthday present ever. Any other announcements from council? Yes, Councilman Anderson.
Yeah, just real quick, not as monumental, but just as important to some of our residents here in Lakewood. There's been a group of 8 and 9-year-olds that made the youth travel baseball team here in Lakewood, and I happen to be one of the assistant coaches. These kids have been practicing since the beginning of December. Finally, about a month and a half ago, they were able to get outside and start practicing. Well, it's been a little bit of a slow start to the year, but I'm proud to say that they went down to Hudson tonight and got a 9-3, cruised to a 9-3 victory. So looking forward to hearing all about the good work tonight. But these little guys, they just love baseball. They got a little tired of losing, so they went out and took care of business in Hudson. So I look forward to getting home and seeing my son tonight. But, yeah, first game I missed all year, and it's their win. So on to Thursday. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any other announcements or business before council? Hearing none and seeing none, move to adjourn.
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion to adjourn? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, we're adjourned. Thank you all so much again.